Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 6 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Houston Texans. What a ranking. When was the last time Houston was seen as a top 10 team, let alone the 6th best team in football? I mean, I don't think I'm alone with this ranking. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the future videos. I don't think I'm alone in this. I think a lot of people are looking at Houston as a top 10 team. Them and the Detroit Lions have seen such a crazy upgrade over the last couple of years in their quality. It's really started with them establishing great quarterback play, great offensive coaching, and a great offensive coordinator. You know, Bobby Slowick, fantastic. Don't know if he's going to be around that much longer, though. Hiring DeMeco Ryans has proven to be one of the better decisions in franchise history. Speaking of great franchise history decisions, CJ Stroud, who I feel silly about my assessment of him last year. I admit it. I've made a video already about it, and I'll talk more about it in this video because I am a man that holds himself accountable and will admit when he was wrong. Now, they have done amazing things in hoping to maintain that quality of CJ Stroud's play with the addition of Stephon Diggs, with the addition of Joe Mixon, then bringing back Dalton Schultz. Holy crap. They extended Nico Collins. He ain't going anywhere either. Fantastic work. The offensive line is a giant question mark. They're going to need to improve on that, but this offensive system has been known, the Shanahan style system, to hide a lot of those deficiencies, but you're still hoping for a breakout star. They brought in Danielle Hunter on defense. Yeah, they weren't done. They didn't just bring in offensive guys. They brought in somebody who's now going to help the number 3 overall pick from last year, not just the number 2 overall pick. They're going to help out their defensive rookie of the year from just last year, Will Anderson, by getting Danielle Hunter in there, a great mentor, and a guy who's going to eat up a lot of the offense's nights during the week in the lead up to their games, opening up more opportunities for Will Anderson. They made a huge mistake of not adding an interior defensive lineman in this draft. We'll get to that as well. They made a huge mistake not bringing back Blake Cashman. I understand there's only so much money to go around, but Blake Cashman broke out last year. They didn't get a chance to keep him. Their secondary is something I'm very excited about. We'll get to that as well. But I think the thing that you'll notice about this team is the overall quality of the players, like the current state of the talent level of players, isn't as high as you'll see from other teams in the top 10. This is a team that their coaching staff is so much a big part of why this team is going to have as much success as they're going to have and why they had as much success as they had last year. So that's where we're going to start here with this high-level coaching staff. So this is my second overall ranked coaching staff. Just an amazing transition from what they were just prior to bringing in DeMeco Ryans, who, after an amazing performance as a rookie head coach, he does rank as my 8th head coach in the league. What he was able to do with a team that looked relatively hopeless and was so poorly run for so long. I mean, no disrespect really to Lovie Smith, but it just wasn't. The only good thing he did was not lose in the final week of in the last game that he coached for them, because that allowed them to get CJ Stroud at the number 2 overall pick, and then encourage them to trade up to 3 to get Will Anderson, who we'll get to. But this is the staff that really elevates this team, that gives this team a chance, that is going to elevate these players to much better overall rankings, I believe, at this time come next year. Because you're going to see from the player perspective, there's some position groups that are still in drastic need of improvement. And we'll stick to the defense side of the ball. That is DeMeco Ryans' specialty, but he is more of the CEO style above anything else, because he does have a defensive coordinator in Matt Burke, who's my 6th ranked defensive coordinator. I don't know that he's exactly at that level of where he'd be in high demand to be a head coach potentially. That's usually reserved for people who are like more considered gurus, and you'll see those guys pop up more often when there's an offensive minded head coach. I could foresee him being sort of swept away by another organization that does have an offensive minded head coach. I think that would open up more opportunities for him in the future, but he's been around for a long time too, so he's not exactly that young candidate that, like a DeMeco Ryans, like a Jonathan Gannon, who are looked at these days in the modern NFL. But he did a fantastic job they were second in tackles for loss last year. You saw Will Anderson improve, and how much of that is Matt Burke? How much is D'Amico Ryans? I think it's a fair combination of both of them. I think they both, in the responsibilities that Matt Burke is given, in comparison to what D'Amico Ryans does oversee. I think he's just done a really he worked with linebackers a lot in Cincinnati. You saw Vincent Ray had like a career year under him. You saw Ray Malaluga, despite the injury, he did really fantastic there. They only had 82 yards when he was there against the run. So the improvement in the linebackers, I think that really bodes well, of course, with D'Amico Ryans, who was an NFL linebacker. A defense that is really run based upon having strong linebacker play. Now you see that in San Francisco, where D'Amico Ryans came from. He came from that Robert Saleh tree, where you see Saleh run that 4-2 defense, where you get those good pass rushes there, but then it's two linebackers who you want to play a complete game of football. They had Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Aziz Al-Shair as well was a part of that group as like a third linebacker. Then on the Jets, you see it with C.J. Mosley and now Quincy Williams, who just exploded onto the scene under Robert Saleh. So you're looking for somebody to take that role. It looked like it was going to be Blake Cashman, who had a tremendous year last year. He left in free agency. So you're hoping that he can come in here. You can develop somebody like a Christian Harris further. Henry Toa you want to see developed as well. They've done an interesting job of throwing assets at particularly Alabama linebackers. So D'Amico Ryans and Matt Burke will have their work cut out for them there. Now, one of the big disadvantages that having a defensive-minded head coach is that it's hard to sustain a top-level offensive coordinator, because that's who the league is looking to hire. And they have one in Bobby Slowick, who's my third ranked offensive coordinator. He directly established CJ Stroud as like a top-level NFL quarterback almost immediately upon his arrival into the league. That is almost unheard of. That does set a very unrealistic expectation for a lot of future rookie quarterbacks as well. And I think it perfectly sets up Bobby Slowick, where if he ends up having another really successful year on offense, which everything that they've done in the offseason dictates that will happen, he's going to be a top candidate to be a head coach in the league. He's going to be viewed as that offensive guru coming from that San Francisco Shanahan system that the league really loves. It's a really quarterback-friendly system, and Slowick being the next guy up in that system, teams are going to be really demanding it, especially when you look at some of the, lower-ended teams that don't have a current head coach. I would look at a team like Tampa Bay, where they may be willing to part ways with Todd Bowles, who is a good defensive coach, but you want to get that. You don't want to miss out on that top offensive mind. We saw Ben Johnson stick around in Detroit. You figure he's going to be the top head coaching candidate. He'll get whatever job he wants come next season. I think the next guy up for that is going to be Bobby Slowick, and I would look for him to this be his last year. Now, if CJ Stroud takes a significant step backwards, that could hurt Bobby Slowick's capabilities. He could also pull a Ben Johnson, stick around for an extra year, and then end up getting the pick of the litter 2 years down the road. I think that could be something that we could see. I think the reason Ben Johnson, one of the reasons why he didn't enter into that head coaching race, is because I feel like Jim Harbaugh sort of took that role of being the head coach who had his pick of the litter. And I think Bobby Slowick, may be able to look at Ben Johnson and see that as well. But just the rookie numbers for CJ Stroud under Slowick, the improvements, with an offensive line that had some injury issues and some experience issues to sort of get around those. A running back room that they did a really good running back by committee, exploding wide receivers onto the scene like Nico Collins, who was just waiting to blow up, and he looked amazing. He looked like a true wide receiver one last year in this system. Tank Dell, before he got hurt, had a great rookie campaign. And now Bobby Slowick gets to also play with Stephon Diggs, which, based on Diggs' attitude, I don't know what that really looks like. But D'Amico Ryans also last year showed that he runs a pretty tight ship, and he's very much a player's coach. He's got a much younger perspective on the league, and I think that could help with Stefon Diggs and integrating him better into this coach, into this team, into this organization, into the offense, working with CJ Stroud, more so than it might have done working previously. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Stefon Diggs has ever had an offensive head coach. He's had Sean McDermott. He had Mike Zimmer for a while in Minnesota. So I don't think he's ever had that. And he doesn't have it here, but he does have a head coach who is significantly younger. So it's a different style. So maybe this actually helps Stefon Diggs, quiet it down a little bit. But that's really on DeMeco Ryans and how he figures out ways to coach up a player who probably is relatively the same age as him. I don't know if they played against each other at any point in time. Wouldn't surprise me if they did. DeMeco Ryans is not that old. Maybe he's a little older than I'm giving credit for. Maybe I'm just old. But then you got Bobby Slowick, who's not, exactly some 50, 60-year-old either. So maybe that sort of youth infusion will help out someone like Stefon Diggs feel, more relatable and, not feel like he's necessarily at some, being talked down to maybe. Maybe that was a problem that he experienced with, guys like McDermott and Mike Zimmer in the past that maybe sort of made him fall out of love with his situations the way that he has, despite having pretty decent quarterback situation in Buffalo. I think this is a minor, drop. But by the end of the season, CJ Stroud could be an MVP. So I really like this coaching staff. I like the youth in here. I like the strategies. I like that they have proven they can elevate young players, that they can form a scheme on both offense and defensive side of the ball that suit the skill sets of these players. And there's so much to be excited for when just 2 years ago it looked like it was a hopeless situation. And, all respect to DeMeco Ryans, who proved to be a great hire. It's always a questionable hire when you bring in a defensive coach. Just taking a look at some of the positional coaches here. No one really stands out to me, but this has been a pretty well put together staff. So it's hard. So the continuity between the positional coaches and the coordinators all the way through the head coach, I think it's going to be very beneficial for all the players. Everyone seems to be very dialed into the scheme and everyone's on the same page. And I expect big things and big improvements and big progression from a lot of these players this year. Let's talk about the quarterback, CJ Stroud. He's coming in tied for 9th for me, 89 grade. I made a video about this already, and I'll reiterate it here. Boy, was I wrong about CJ Stroud. I looked at him like this is just another Ohio State quarterback coming into the NFL who's going to stink. And the fact that he's on Houston, it's a good situation for him to be in. It's a quarterback-friendly system, but man, oh man, does he got nothing around him. Little did I know that he'd be so capable of being able to elevate players around him, that he was going to grow the way that he did throughout the season, and that he was going to grow alongside of so many of his teammates, his younger teammates that had a lot to prove as well, like Nico Collins, like Tank Dell. It was just an amazing performance. He was so accurate with the ball. He wasn't afraid to push the ball down the field. He was making smart decisions on third down and other key situations. He wasn't falling behind schedule. I've talked about that a lot in recent videos about staying ahead of schedule and quarterbacks making smart decisions to keep the team ahead of schedule from down to down on drive to drive. And he did that with the best of them. You would have thought last year that CJ Stroud had been playing in the league for 5-6 years. He was very much up there. He very much was a top 10 quarterback last season. Now, he sort of will sit here for me because there is the fear of the sophomore slump. There is the fear that now there's a whole year of tape. All the teams within the division are focused on him. No one's taking him lightly. He's had all this offseason hype on top of everything else. And they're going to start treating him not like a rookie quarterback for an entire offseason now in through the season. So there is the possibility we get a sophomore slump here. Now, they did a great job of surrounding him with even more weapons. Joe Mixon, who we'll get to, Stefon Diggs, who we'll get to, guys coming back on the offensive line. So the chances of that, I believe, are very low, which is why I didn't rank him lower than this. I feel like this really is his floor for this year. I think worst case scenario, you're looking at the 9th or 10th best quarterback in the league come this season. I think best case scenario, you're looking at somebody who will potentially be the MVP of the league. I look at him and Jordan Love sort of in that same vein, where I think worst case scenario, you're getting a top 10 quarterback. Best case scenario, you just got the MVP of the league and you're looking at a deep playoff run. One thing that he showed also that he only really showed once or twice in college was his ability to move, his ability to run. Now, he doesn't contribute in my quarterback run threat grades, but I think just his maneuverability within the pocket, his ability to position himself to make the best throw despite pressure, despite maybe one side of the line collapsing, despite maybe a receiver falling down or not running the right route or being locked up. He's able to progress through comfortably from read 1 to read 2 to read 3, even to read 4 in some situations that we saw last year. We saw that quite often from him, getting through all those progressions while also manipulating the pocket with his legs, being able to step up into the pocket, bail out, and still be able to keep his eyes downfield, make the proper throws. And now again, with an extra year here, more understanding of the system, better players around him, I expect there to be even more of that. He could be somebody who could lead the league in passing yards this season. Maybe not in passing touchdowns. There's a pretty good backfield that we're about to get to. And maybe the record doesn't necessarily reflect that of an MVP season the way that people would like, because, they are still young, so there's going to be gaffes on the defensive side of the ball. I'm sure there's some experience there when we get to that. But this is as excited as any Houston Texans fan base should be, since really they brought in Deshaun Watson. He had that great rookie performance as well. Now, if CJ Stroud just stays out of the massage parlors, I think you got a franchise quarterback for the next 15 years. So let's go to the running back room here, and they're tied for 10th in run threats. Obviously, they're not going to have this many guys. Some of these guys might have already been cut by the time this gets posted. Cuts have already been started to go. As of right now, the only cuts they made were Noah Brown and McTelvin Agim. So I don't expect all these running backs to obviously be on this team. No one's going to keep this many running backs. But Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce are a great combination. If Dameon Pierce is still here, he could be somebody that they get rid of, unfortunately. I really liked that they positioned Dameon Pierce. We'll start with him as the kick returner on their depth chart. The last time I looked, which was yesterday, I've been marching up and down in a lot of these videos about the new kickoff rules and why you're not putting a great weapon back there. To have a starting quality running back like Dameon Pierce as your kick returner, that could be deadly for this team on special teams. That could make them a real threat on the special team side of things. And for him to be a great spell here for Joe Mixon, to come in and be a power guy, be a thumper, where Joe Mixon can maybe now resort to being solely this finesse guy, I think it plays really well for both of them. Jawar Jordan, Cam Akers, British Brooks, you got Darryl Gunbolier, JJ Taylor. It'll be interesting to see which one of these guys they keep. I would really keep, obviously, Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce. Joe Mixon coming over from Cincinnati. He's entering another tremendous situation. This Shanahan system is not only quarterback friendly, but it's extremely running back friendly, especially with the style of Joe Mixon that he runs. He's very good at hitting that hole and accelerating through it. He's accelerating through contact as well. It's just a matter of the wear and tear that he's put onto his body at the time in Cincinnati. Now, a lot of people were saying the same thing about Christian McCaffrey before going to San Francisco. And I would say the offensive line talent, from an offensive line talent perspective, especially since last year, there's not a whole lot of quality difference between what Joe Mixon is getting here and what Christian McCaffrey's had over in San Francisco. So, they both have really strong left tackle play with Tunsil and Trent Williams, and then a lot of questions for spread out the rest of the offensive line. I think in a couple of ways you could say that their offensive line is a little bit better, so it puts Joe Mixon in an even better position than Christian McCaffrey. Now, Christian McCaffrey, I think, is a better player. I think he better suits the Shanahan system than Joe Mixon does. But I do think Joe Mixon is bound for some sort of career resurgence here. Especially when you come in and he is the best receiving back. Now they're tied for 22nd in that. There really isn't anyone else on this roster, though, that I feel can fill that role. So when you get into those situations that you see in that Shanahan system with a Christian McCaffrey, I think you can put Joe Mixon into a lot of those situations, and I think you can manufacture a lot of touches for him in this way. I think you can get him out in space. It'll help with the wear and tear that he's already put on his body, all those miles he's already put on his body in Cincinnati. And I just think it opens up a whole other world for him. This is the career resurgence for Joe Mixon to get back into that true top 10 running back conversation that I don't feel a lot of people have him in anymore. And I don't know if that's fair or not, especially, being in Cincinnati the last couple of years with Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase, with T. Higgins, with Tyler Boyd, a very much a pass-happy offense. Now coming into a place where I think it'll be, despite what I just said about C.J. Stroud, there's going to be a lot more balance here. I think he's going to be used a lot differently and used in a way that's going to benefit him and his long-term ability throughout the season. Having a great backup like Dameon Pierce, who can come in, do a lot of some of the grunt work throughout games, do a lot of the power short yardage situation, shorten games up, kill some time. Even somebody in there like Jawar Jordan or Cam Akers, if they decide to keep another veteran running back in there, there's going to be a lot of opportunities here for Joe Mixon to be set up for more success than he would otherwise, where the expectation would be that he would be, eating up every single carry and every single running back touch minus 1 or 2 a game. Now that's not really the case. He could be in a position where he could get 16, 17 touches a game, be extremely effective overall, and then you let Dameon Pierce carry the ball a bunch of times. You let Jawar Jordan carry the ball a bunch of times. You let Cam Akers work it in there. Maybe Cam Akers finally gets back to feeling healthy again, and then he's a great guy there. And then, maybe you move on from Dameon Pierce. I think that could be on the table. I think Dameon Pierce and Cam Akers are more competing with each other than, say, Jawar Jordan is with Dameon Pierce or Cam Akers, just being rookies and on, cheaper rookie deals and everything. But still a very, very quality running back room here. A great improvement in the running back room as well, going from Devin Singletary to Joe Mixon. And speaking of improvements here, their wide receiver room now is tied for second in the NFL. You got Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, 2 legit wide receiver ones. Now you do worry about regression with Stephon Diggs. He didn't look like the Stephon Diggs of old last year, and maybe you can chalk that up to disillusionment with the organization and the offense. But a guy who definitely was on the rise was Nico Collins. Now, you've put Stephon Diggs with a guy who is probably the best complement on the other side of the field that he's had in forever. Like, since Adam Thielen. Probably, I would say that. Him and Adam Thielen were a great combination. I think Nico Collins is a much different player, obviously, than Adam Thielen is. Presents a whole lot more. I think the upside of Nico Collins is much better than Adam Thielen ever had. And Adam Thielen was a great wide receiver there for playing next to Stephon Diggs for a while. Now you put Diggs back in that situation. He's a little bit older. He's a little bit wiser. Maybe the change. Maybe he's going to be on his best behavior. And so many opportunities are going to open up for him. And then Nico Collins, he's somebody who you can do anything and everything with. You saw it just last season. He was running go routes, winning contested catches. He was streaking across the middle of the field on crossing routes. He was running hitch routes. He was getting screen. Like, he was doing it all, and he was doing it all so incredibly effectively. And to play with that level of confidence, for them to have extended his contract, to get another year with C.J. Stroud, who they seem to really understand each other. And that may, even though I do put Stephon Diggs slightly ahead of Nico Collins in terms of his skill, I still think you have to do that. The production of Nico Collins, I think, will end up superseding that of Stephon Diggs. I think Diggs is going to be put into much more specific scenarios that are going to really benefit the offense. And then you got Tank Dell, who got injured last year, but before he got injured, he was as much of the offensive rookie of the year as CJ Stroud was. It was just fantastic performances, and him coming in now with these compliments, you can't double cover everyone. You really can't. So which one of these guys from week to week is going to be the one the defense focuses on? And then all you got to do is just shift to put the focus on the other 2 receivers, and you will run roughshod all over these teams. It's just, to have 2 legit number 1 receivers, and then Tank Dell, who's like a real high-end number 2, low-end number 1. like it's just an amazing group to have for CJ Stroud. It's really going to help his growth overall. I think Stephon Diggs will have a lot of knowledge to pass along to Nico Collins. I think to Tank Dell specifically, and then you got more veteran presences in there like Robert Woods. You got John Mechie in there, who people are talking about him potentially getting traded, which I could see, just because he's your wide receiver 4-5. Like, that is craziness. They brought in Ben Skoranek, who, great blocking and special teams player here. I think can carve out a spot for himself. Xavier Hutchinson, extremely underrated. I could see them trading John Mechie and allowing Xavier Hutchinson to be like that wide receiver 5 on this roster. But I do expect all but one of these guys to make the team here. I think Robert Woods makes the team as a good veteran in the locker room. I know he's always heard he's a good locker room guy. I think John Mechie does sort of become by default the odd man out. I think he's got the best trade value of everybody else, so it'll be the most benefit for them to maybe move on from him. But like an absolute embarrassment of riches here. A bunch of different good little skill sets there. Ben Skoranek, to be able to bring him in, run him in jet motion, just have him start cracking guys in the run game. I think that's going to be extremely underrated, especially in situations where you're going to want to run the clock out. You get Diggs off the field, he ain't going to block anyone. You get Tank Dell off the field, he ain't going to block anyone. You might run with a couple of tight ends there and Ben Skoranek and just pound the ball at people with Dameon Pierce there. And there's a real possibility that could be extremely effective in closing out games. You got Dalton Schultz, the 11th ranked tight end for me. So it's a weapon everywhere at every single level. You do kind of worry a little bit about, when you get in those late in games, you want to go to bigger sets. They got Cade Stover, rookie tight end. Breven Jordan's there. Don't know if every single one of those guys will be there. Don't know if Breven Jordan makes it to this team with them bringing in Caden Stover. Tegan Quitoriano, I think, is going to be more of that blocking guy for them anyway. But, you got Dalton Schultz, who was really on a prove-it deal coming from Dallas after Dallas sort of just let him walk away. And he just proved to be a great safety blanket for CJ Stroud. And I think that he got back to that level where people were talking about Dalton Schultz as a truly, really top-level tight end in the league. I don't know if his production based upon this is going to be like top 5 tight end numbers, maybe not even top 10 tight end numbers. But I think his game-to-game, week-to-week, drive-to-drive impact is going to be very, very strong. And to always have him there as that threat, teams are going to have to put some type of focus on him as well. So it's going to be just impossible, I feel, for these defenses. And all CJ Stroud has to do is play a smart game. All CJ Stroud has to do is throw the right ball. And if that's to Dalton Schultz on a 5-yard out, or if he's taking it up the seam, pressing on a safety and pressing on the safeties in cover 2, while you got Stephon Diggs, trying not to force the ball to these outside receivers, especially Stephon Diggs, and understanding that you have Dalton Schultz, who's as good as any tight end, that you could have in the league. There's very few that are going to be better in the receiving game, especially than Dalton Schultz. There's not going to be too many people that are more sure-handed, that are better route runners, that are better athletes. So to take advantage of that, the weaponry can't be understated enough. Now this becomes the issue of the team, and it's the same issue that we were talking about earlier when talking about Joe Mixon San Francisco has. It's a great system that does do a great job of hiding the overall skill level of the offensive line. Now, as overall skill, pass blocking, they're tied for 28th in the league here. The only one is Laramie Tunsil, who's elite. Everyone else is just covered in question marks. We'll start with Titus Howard, who, coming off an injury again, he's going to be playing right tackle. What does this look like for Titus Howard? He's never really settled in at either guard or tackle position to be anything type of consistently reliable. So what's that going to look like? Then you got Shaq Mason, who's this, he's a quality starter, but maybe more of just an adequate starter, if you get what I'm saying. he's solid, but you don't want him to be your second best offensive lineman, and that's pretty much the case here. Then you got the two young guys, the two young bucks on this offensive line starting. You got Kenyon Green, who looked horrific in his rookie year. Absolutely horrific. Now, it does take longer for some guys. Not everyone comes into the league and plays guard and is Trey Smith. Not everyone is that. But Kenyon Green is a first-round pick, and he was a first-round pick for a reason, because of that upside that everyone saw in him. He's going to have to really start showing that now. I mean, he's playing next to Laramie Tunsil. He's got the best dance partner that he could ask for in this situation here. So you're going to need to see him start to play with much better hands than what he's had. Keep moving his feet. He had problems stopping his feet a lot. That was allowing him to get beat and get bulldozed by people. That was another thing that was happening that was just mind-blowing. It's not something you ever really saw from him in college, is getting that happen to him. He usually very much dominated everything, which is why, as an interior offensive lineman, he was drafted in the first round, that like top 20 range. Then you got Juice Scruggs, who is another one who in his rookie year as center was not very good. I would argue, I think everyone would agree, that he was very much overdrafted as a third-round pick, an early third-round pick in that draft. I feel like they could have done so much better with that pick, and I think his poor rookie play really showed it. But they are committed to him playing center, and I think it just really has to do with the fact that his skill set, they like the way his skill set mends with the scheme that they're trying to run on offense, which I can understand. Again, but you got two key interior offensive players here who you've invested in recently, a first-round pick and an early third-round pick, that need to get it together. Laramie Tunsil can't do all this work on his own. If those two guys in particular can improve and become like quality starter level players by the end of the season, then this really does elevate this entire offensive line and helps everything out. When it comes to some of the depth here, they do have some options in David Sharp. They drafted Blake Fisher to be like this swing tackle. I didn't really like that pick at all, but we'll see how that works out. I think they have a really good safety net, though, at center when talking about Juice Scruggs and Jarrett Patterson. I like Jarrett Patterson's a much better player, but I think they view the upside of Juice Scruggs a lot better, and they just want to get him the reps here. People talk about Kendrick Green. I think Kendrick Green and Kenyon Green are in direct competition with one another here. You saw Kevin Dotson explode onto the scene with the Rams in that like McVay-Shanahan system after struggling in Pittsburgh. Kendrick Green's another one that was from Pittsburgh that now is here working in the system. Maybe he ends up becoming a breakout star here, but Kenyon Green, I feel, is going to be the one, obviously due to the investment they made on him, is going to get the opportunities more so than Kendrick Green will. Kendrick Green's going to have to, he's working an uphill battle here. When you get to the run blocking, they're 30th. They're even worse. And why are they even worse? Because Laramie Tunsil's not a great run blocker. That's why. Everyone else is pretty much what they are, which is, I can't believe that they're a starter. Maybe minus Shaq Mason. Shaq Mason is a starter on most teams in the league. He's like that solid veteran like we talked about. But these other guys need to improve. And I think, again, it goes back to Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs. Juice Scruggs, a better run blocker than a pass blocker, to his credit. Thumbs up for that. Titus Howard, not a better run blocker. Thumbs down for that. Kenyon Green, it's hard to grade him, because he was, again, so terrible in his rookie year. What he needs to, if he's not going to be a great pass blocker, this is where he needs to excel this year. He needs to excel on having a better get off on the ball, attacking the defensive lineman, getting to that second level effectively, and opening up these running lanes in the zone blocking scheme for Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, who are quality backs who you don't want to hold back because of the offensive line. Now, again, this new system that Kenyon Green didn't get to play in all that much at all, or if at all, last season, could help him, could hide a lot of his deficiencies, maybe let him play better than what his actual skill set would project him to do. Maybe that's a thing that's going to happen with him this year. And you get to some of the depth again. Kendrick Green and him are he's just slightly better than Kendrick Green in everything for me. The big one that stands out in terms of depth is, again, Jarrett Patterson, who, if he ends up being the starter over Juice Scruggs, I think you see a drastic improvement here in their grades. You go from a guy who's a 52, you get to a 71. in run blocking. So you're going to see them rise up. That probably raise them up to maybe the 25th run blocking team. And then it'll raise them up another 2 or 3 spots in pass blocking. Still, a bottom 10, bottom 12 offensive line overall, but a much better performing one. This is a group that is in desperate need of somebody to break out. And you're hoping that it's Kenyon Green specifically. It's a lot better to have one of your guards break out than maybe your second-year center. You just hope that Juice Scruggs can sort of have a nice upward trajectory. I would really be hoping that it was Kenyon Green who just flies onto the scene here. But overall, this is the 12th ranked offense in the league for me, tied for 11th in passing offense and 21st in run offense. Again, these grades are dragged down by the quality of the offensive line, but this passing offense easily can be in the top 10 overall with a better performing offensive line, and you can get this run offense into that 17 to 15 range if you get the same type of breakout star on the offensive line as well. Now let's move on to the defense, and they are the 9th ranked edge rush group here. Talk about adding a monster. They add Danielle Hunter, who's who's a true number one. They're dealing with 2 number 1 edge rushers here. And this is also going to allow Will Anderson to continue to develop. It's going to prevent teams from being able to double team him. And Danielle Hunter has been a number 1 edge rusher for so long. Him jumping over to this group it's amazing. This is going to be so great to watch them go after the quarterbacks. And it's not even like they don't have great depth either. They have Derek Barnett, who is he'd be a quality starter on many other teams as an edge rusher. Jerry Hughes, great veteran presence, always seems to find his way back onto Houston or Buffalo. They have the rookie Solomon Byrd. So they got 5 guys in here. This could become a pretty healthy edge rush rotation here. Some really good spell opportunities for these guys, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr., because they are also the best ones against the run as well. They're tied for 9th in edge against the run. Quality in that. Derek Barnett, again, quality backup. I consider Jerry Hughes and Solomon Byrd also to be quality backups here. So they got a lot of depth. They're going to be able to rotate this line really comfortably. Will Anderson really settled in, throughout last year, winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. You hope he can take another step forward with Danielle Hunter opposite him. And you also hope that Danielle Hunter could be a great influence on him as well. Get him to, change up some of the pass rush moves. Teach him something, like an on-field teacher or in that film room of being like, when you see this, hit him with this. Don't always do this. Don't always do that. I noticed that you do this. Hit him with this, hit him with that. Stuff that Danielle Hunter has learned over the years as a great quality, at times in his career, a top 5 edge rusher in the NFL, to get Will Anderson to that next level. And I think that there was part of the goal of bringing Danielle Hunter, not only to drastically improve your team, but to be that influence to Will Anderson, keep the opportunities flowing for him opposite of Danielle Hunter in this edge room. But where they suffer still is on the interior. Now, you got there Danico Autry, who is suspended early in the year. He's going to miss 6 games. When he does return, he's going to be a quality interior pass rusher in these scenarios. He is an undersized guy. He's more like a 3-4 defensive end type that you saw him play in Tennessee. Here, he's probably going to end up being a more traditional defensive end who kicks inside in these situations. But what a quality you're getting here as a guy used to sort of playing that interior role in these scenarios. You also got Mario Edwards, who's a little bit undersized as well. It's going to be interesting to see who they figure out is going to be their nose tackle on this team. Khalil Davis, Tim Settle could be that guy. Folu Fadukasi coming over. You hope he can maybe revitalize his career as well. But just the upside is just lacking. They're solid with the complements of their edge room. When you get to them against the run, they drop to tied for 24th. This is where you're going to see Fatukasi come in. I feel like that he's going to end up playing this nose tackle role on this team in this scenario. And then you're going to have someone like Khalil Davis in particular, who will be sort of like your third rotational interior defensive lineman throughout games. He can play in all scenarios. He's sort of the best backup in every scenario. So I think that's where you'll see him. I think on early downs, you can see them get into perhaps some bigger sets where you'll see maybe Danico Autry, who would grade much higher as an early down defensive end than he does as a interior defensive lineman for running purposes. Maybe they get a little bit bigger in that situation, want to play with a little bit more power and less finesse throughout games. That could be an opportunity where maybe you get Khalil Davis kicking in, Mario Edwards coming out, and then you get like a Will Anderson or Daniil Hunter on the edge with Danico Autry as well. Those are all possibilities, but this is a position group, the interior defensive line, where I was very surprised they didn't address it. They traded out of the first round with Minnesota to give themselves an extra second round pick. Now, I did think that someone like Johnny Newton or maybe like a better run defender like a Tavondre Sweat would be in their future in this draft, just because this really stuck out to me as a position of need going into the draft. And they just never addressed it. They brought in, Danico Autry, they had Mario Edwards, they brought in like Fatukasi, and they're kind of just like, this is what we're going to roll with here. And it was just, it was the only questionable move they made all offseason. For me, it was the only questionable move. Now, you try this group out, you do have some draft capital coming next season where maybe that's where you decide to pick it up. There are some really good interior defensive linemen coming up in this next draft. It was just a weird decision. I feel like that decision in the short term in particular is going to hold back this defense. It's going to make them more susceptible to get run on the same way they kind of were last season. And especially between the tackles, those A and those B gap runs, they've been solid off the edge, and with Blake Cashman getting able to sideline to sideline last year, but it was sort of like that A and B gap runs is where they get killed all year. And again, they didn't do anything to really address that. And I felt that they should have maybe gone out, gotten that true nose tackle like a Tavondre Sweat, just played him on early downs at that 0-1 tech role, have him eat the space up, and then maybe you work in the athleticism of a Mario Edwards or a Fatukasi, who was much more of an athlete. Tim Settle, for example. I think that would have opened up more opportunities for them. And put them into probably the top 20 for interior defensive line grades on both pass, interior rush, and run stuffing, which would have then elevated their defense even more. And I think also having that rookie in there who could develop would also raise the overall ceiling of what this interior group could be. I just see this group as like a low ceiling interior defensive line group just because of the players that they have. Like I don't foresee them being able to outperform these grades at all. Meanwhile, their edge room, I have them tied for ninth in rushing the passer, tied for ninth against the run. I could see by the end of the year them greatly outplaying this. I see almost this ninth grade as the floor, where it's more likely to be the floor than the ceiling, where for this interior defensive line, I see the exact opposite. Moving on to the linebackers, they have Christian Harris and they have Azeez Al-Shaair, who we talked about earlier. Who was on San Francisco, went to Tennessee, and is now here in Houston. So he does have an understanding of this 4-2 style of base defense. We saw Christian Harris really come onto the scene last year, but the big one that they're missing is Blake Cashman, who would have greatly elevated this linebacker group. They kind of did take a step back when they lost him and had to sort of start, almost from the beginning again to some degree. You want to get Al-Shaair, who is, he's, not the most stout linebacker. He does fill that great athlete role. But overall, right now, they're just the 20th linebacker group for me in pass coverage. Henry To'oTo'o is not going to bring you anything in pass coverage. That's not remotely what his game is. Then you got Jake Hansey, you got Deshaun Phillips, Neville Hewitt. Like, who out of this group is going to make this team? Will they be cutting one of these guys, and who will it be and for what reason. I think that's so up in the air right now. It's hard to really predict who that's going to be. I'm sure that person would have already been picked by the time this video drops, so forgive me for not being Nostra Will right here and being able to predict such a thing. But I do think Christian Harris is in a tremendous situation here where I think they will position him throughout this year to sort of be the Fred Warner, CJ Mosley of this defense, while Al-Shaair will fill into that role that Dre Greenlaw took from him in San Francisco, that Quincy Williams has filled out with the Jets. I really like the potential here of what Christian Harris can become. I was very high on Christian Harris during the draft process. I thought him falling in the draft was a tragedy and a mistake, and he ended up in a great situation. Now, when you go against the run, they dropped to tied for 26th. Christian Harris did not play well against the run last year at all. Azeez Al-Shaair is a great run defender for a linebacker. He's a great second option. Now you're hoping for a breakout here from somebody in the run game at linebacker. You're hoping that it's Christian Harris. You're hoping that another year with DeMeco Ryans and Matt Burke, who are notorious for developing linebackers, maintaining quality in linebackers, accessing their skill sets, will be able to find a great run defense out of Christian Harris. And maybe even enhance that at Henry To'oTo'o, for example, who they also invested a draft pick in just last year. And that you get a nice solid group of three linebackers here. Because Jake Hansen, Delshon Phillips, Neville Hewitt, those are like your special teams guys that you're sort of hoping. You hope that To'oTo'o, Christian Harris, and Azeez Al-Shaair are your three linebackers that you're rotating in and out. Henry To'oTo'o coming in here on these early downs. And then the highest combination being Harris and Al-Shaair, who I believe have the top level investment in an Al-Shaair got him in free agency, and Christian Harris, who was put in a position, he was making so many great plays last year, but he was making a lot of boneheaded ones as well that were being covered up by some real quality play from Blake Cashman. Now, I think that his responsibilities, expectations are now a little bit higher. He's another year into the league, and I do expect there to be improvements here. I don't know how drastic those improvements are going to be, but again, sort of like what you're hoping with a Kenyon Green and a Juice Scruggs on the offensive line and the offensive side of the ball, I think you want to continue to see Christian Harris trending in that upward direction. I think Henry To'oTo'o is another one you want to see trend in that upwards direction, so that by the end of the season, you're looking at it and going like, okay, we got like a top 15, top 12 linebacker room now, rather than like, at best 20th in the league. That's just relying more on great coaching and great scheming more than the actual sheer talent of the players. I think that's sort of what you want the goal to be here. Now, one thing that's really going to help out this defense is the quality of the cornerback room. They're tied for third for me coming into this season. Your outside corners are going to be Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter. That's what it should look like. Kamari Lassiter, the second round pick out of Georgia. Derek Stingley, former third overall pick. Rocky first season, continued a great second season, continuing to play well, really establishing himself as a number one corner in the league. Desmond King is one of the best nickel cornerbacks in the league that has existed in the league for the last 10 years. When you play him outside, he's absolutely god-awful terrible. We saw that during his time in Houston when Lovie Smith was there, and whoever the other head coach was before him. Was it Bill O'Brien? I think there was one in between him and Bill O'Brien. But he was absolutely horrific playing on the outside. When you play him in the slot, he is fantastic. It fits his skill set really well. He's good at coming up and being physical. He's also been a great return man, going back to even his time with the Chargers. You just don't know when that downward trend is going to happen for him in terms of his overall play. But he's got great balance here where he really will only have to be playing that role while they let Kamari Lassiter develop there. I think Kamari Lassiter is going to be up there with some of these great defensive rookies this year as a candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's also going to get a lot of opportunities to do that with how good Derek Stingley's been. I think teams are going to be wanting to shy away from him and shy away from Desmond King as well. Some of the depth here is questionable. Miles Bryant, Mike Ford, Jeff Okudah. A lot of potential, I think CJ Henderson's probably going to get cut. There's just a lot of potential here, but potential doesn't buy the groceries. Actual performance does. Great high-end starters, from my opinion. I think that Jeff Okudah is going to be the one here that gets opportunities if he ends up being someone who makes the team here. Just because he is a former number 3 overall pick as well, just like Derek Stingley was. Just never worked out in Detroit. Didn't work out in Atlanta last year. Maybe getting with this staff in particular with a great pass rush in front of him, which he didn't have in Atlanta, didn't really have in Detroit either when he was there. Now you're getting into a situation where you got this quality in front of you. You got a high-end defensive-minded coach. Maybe this is where it clicks for Jeff Okudah, and I think that that's where the opportunities for him are going to come from. But Derek Stingley, I can't stress enough. He's been great since his freshman year at LSU. Came into the league with these high expectations, and if it wasn't really for Sauce Gardner immediately being like the best corner in the NFL from the first game he ever played, I don't think Derek Stingley would be looked at sort of the way I see people looking at him, which is that he's not that good. That he's not like, I rank Derek Stingley as being like a top 7 or 8 cornerback in the entire league. And I think that he will show that this year in particular. I think especially with that great edge rush that's going to be coming there, he's going to be able to play a lot more ball hawking football. He's going to be able to play a lot more instinctively. He's going to be able to commit more in man coverage and zone coverage, trust his eyes a lot more, and being able to make a lot more plays on the back end. I love what is going to very much potentially happen here with Derek Stingley. And unfortunately, Defensive Player of the Year is an edge rusher, pass rusher award these days, kind of like the MVP is a quarterback award. So I can't say that he's going to be somebody who could do that, but I think he will have top cornerback numbers by the end of this season. And I think he will finally establish himself amongst the entire football fan community, football analyst community, as being a top 5 corner in the NFL. And he's complemented by an interesting safety group. They're tied for 21st in safety coverage with the rookie Kalen Bullock coming in with veteran Jimmy Ward. Kalen Bullock is going to be that middle of the field, deep third safety. You're not going to see him coming up and making tackles on early downs. I do think you could see some 3 safety situations where Jalen Pitre gets on the field and Jalen Pitre ends up coming up and playing like a closer to the line safety. They are tied for 15th with Pitre and Jimmy Ward in DB run support. Kalen Bullock is one of the worst run support safeties on the roster, him and Eric Murray, but what he brings in pass coverage is much better than what Jalen Pitre has. But Jalen Pitre has established himself as a quality player in run support at least, and you hope that he can continue to develop in pass coverage, that he'll be put in better situations, and as the quality of the cornerback room develops, that so will he, that he'll be able to play a lot more comfortably. We talk about playing more instinctually a lot. I think those opportunities are going to come up for him more and more. Jimmy Ward is going to be on the field the whole game. The veteran, he's been great in run support. It's sort of as he's gone from corner to safety to corner to safety, he never got to that top level that you were hoping he would get to in terms of overall as a cover safety. I think with Kalen Bullock's introduction, there's going to be a lot less expectation of him playing like a deep third safety role, like a deep, cover 3 or even cover 4, cover 2 safety role. He's going to be able to play closer to the line now with Kalen Bullock's introduction into this roster. And I think that's going to open up more opportunities for Jimmy Ward to excel in the pass coverage aspect. Now, will he ever get back to being viewed as like a top 10 safety in the league? Probably not. But I do like him as a veteran presence. I do like him being somebody who has been closely linked to the Saleh defensive system, that 49er defensive system that's been carried over here. So he'll be able to, and I think now playing that more comfortable role with Bullock around, more often at least, he's going to be able to truly settle in and I think have one of his better seasons performances that we're used to seeing the peak Jimmy Ward have. But with the Kalen Bullock, true passing situations, he'll get on the field. Jalen Pitre needs to step up and be much more consistent in coverage. He's just struggled in that sense. You'll see him make really great plays because he plays so aggressive and physical that, he comes down the field full speed downward and is able to make a big play on a ball or a big play on a pass catcher or a running back or a tight end. You've seen that from him, but you can put together a highlight tape of any player that's ever existed and make them look like they were an absolute megastar. And that's the same that you can say, people did that with Marlon Mack. They got like a 5-minute Marlon Mack clip and you go like, Marlon Mack was the best running back ever. Turns out he wasn't. He was a good running back, but it wasn't sustainable and he was never really like top level. I think you can do the same thing with Jalen Pitre's pass coverage, him in the passing game. You can put together a really good highlight package since Jalen Pitre's come into the league. But you could also put together a low light in pass coverage in particular that would be a little bit longer than his highlight one. And that's an issue. And you want him to continue to develop. Now, is he going to be somebody who just settles in as being that strong safety, great run defending defensive back who is a liability in pass coverage more often than not like he's been? Is that just who he is? There's a possibility of that, but I think there is always going to be a spot on the roster for a super physical safety, especially when you have Jimmy Ward who's aging out of the league to a certain degree. That the future of Kalen Bullock and Jalen Pitre being a safety group here, I don't necessarily see that as being necessarily a bad thing. I think Kalen Bullock can develop his coverage even further and be like a real quality guy in that. And then they could be playing with those two guys hovering around that 15th ranked safety group, which with how good their edge rush is projecting to be, with how good their cornerback room is, that's really all you're going to need to sustain a really good defense on the back end and prevent big plays from killing you from week to week. But overall, in terms of player quality, it's the 22nd ranked defense in the league. It's a defense that's highly reliant on how great their coaching and scheme is. 15th in pass defense, tied for 22nd in run defense. Now, their interior defensive line being such a low ceiling, I think does hold this group back to a degree in run defense, and slightly in pass defense as well. I think you can say the same thing about the linebackers and the safeties. But the advantage, again, that they have that other teams just don't is how great the coaching staff is, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, and it's really going to help elevate all these guys. So overall, it's my 6th ranked team, 2nd best coaching staff, 12th best offense, 22nd defense. But again, when you have such a high quality staff, that's how you get a 12th and 22nd ranked offense and defense to be the 6th best team in the entire league. And if you get top 5 quarterback play, there's no reason this team doesn't have a deep playoff run in them. And there it is. What do you think about the Houston Texans? And what do you think of what I think about the Houston Texans? I think they're a great team, and they're a team that is somehow number 6, but still on the rise. Look for them to be in the top 5, top 4, top 3, maybe even number 1 in next year's Deep Dive series. But it is this year's Deep Dive series, and this is what that series has looked like up until this point. That you're watching it, not the time that I made this. This is like, I'm going into the future a little bit here. Video, playlist, subscriptions. You can do all those things, like, comment as well. And I will see you guys with the next video next time.